practicing the skill of self-compassion. I think at the heart of many problems really is a lack of self-acceptance and feeling like I'm not good enough, or I will be good enough if only I can do this. But I think the difficulty really is that there's not really some objective standard that human beings are measured against. But like we can all get caught in that. We can talk to ourselves in ways we would never speak to others, especially those others that we care about. So self-compassion really is a way to understand and really calm our inner critic. Warmth, care, and concern to ourselves in a way that we would to others. It requires us to accept our humanness because we all have flaws, we all struggle, and we all have challenges and difficulties. It really is the exact opposite of self-criticism. One of my favorite self-compassionate sayings is, "How human of you." I think that this is such a powerful thing to say to ourselves, especially for those of us that can be hard on ourselves or when we lose perspective. Self-compassion really allows you to show kindness to yourself, especially when you're suffering or failing or feeling inadequate, which is such a human experience. A couple things I think are really important to clarify is that sometimes people confuse self-compassion with self-pity or complaining, but self-compassion is not self-pity. When someone feels self-pity, they really become immersed in their own problems. They forget that others have similar problems, and self-pity doesn't recognize that interconnectedness. And this is where self-compassion is really different because it allows someone to acknowledge their experience and the experience of others. It basically calls us not to rank our suffering, which I really love. I love that, the framing of that. So for example, like COVID can be hard for me and it can also be hard for you, regardless of our different circumstances. That's what self-compassion says. And then also self-compassion is very different than self-indulgence. So self-indulgence might give someone a free pass to engage in any activity under that facade of kindness to themselves. But self-compassion is very different because being compassionate to yourself also means that you want to be happy and healthy in the long run, right? So as an example, I know that a lot of students, just a lot of human beings in general, have really been struggling with motivation during COVID. It might be a lack of routine. It can be hard to eat well or to feel productive. And for some, even getting out of bed can be really hard these days. But the big difference here between a self-compassionate approach and a self-indulgent approach is how you positively respond to yourself in these moments to create change or to help get yourself back on track. So being self-compassionate might involve taking time to give yourself an emotional break, engaging in positive self-talk, or even practicing forgiveness when things haven't gone the way that you were hoping. So I hope that that's clear, like the distinction between self-compassion and being self-indulgent, or being self-compassionate and having self-pity. Sometimes that's confusing for people, and that's really important to clarify. We'll move to the next slide, please, Sarah. Great, thank you. So just within that idea, that way of thinking that sometimes we can speak to ourselves in ways we would never speak to someone that we love and care about, there's a question up here that I want you to reflect on. So what are some of the compassionate things that you've said to a family member or a friend who's been struggling lately? Just think about that for a minute, and then if you would like to pop that in the chat or up on the whiteboard, it would be neat to see what sorts of things we've done. I can share for myself. I know even just simply, I have a friend who's just kind of struggling with some of the isolation, and so I sent a text the other day and just said, thinking of you and feeling hopeful that we'll be able to see each other again soon. So I sent the text. I also see someone up there has told someone it's going to be okay. Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else? I see some other typing going up there. Wait till it pops up. Yes. So I have up there, let's not forget that we're going through a global pandemic. If I see that they're struggling, yes, that reminder, right? That perspective. That's great. And then I'm just going to move my thing because I can't see. How can I support you? I think it's, yes, a question mark. Yes. How can I support you? That, yeah, asking someone that we love and care for, how can I support you? I see that you're struggling. Saying it's going to be okay, reminding we're going through a global pandemic. What can I do to support you better? Yes. Oh, we've got some very compassionate people. Oh, that's lovely. I love you and I'm here for you. Wow. Feelings are temporary. Oh, so true. What compassionate things to say. Oh, look at the bigger picture. Yes, that reminder, right? Trying to help give some perspective. So I see a lot of gentleness up here. I see a lot of concern. I see a lot of willingness to support. And some stamps going up there besides other things. That's great. Thank you everyone so much for sharing. And Sarah, can we move to the next slide, please?
Perfect. Sam, I see there's another comment that went up just as I was changing it. Do you see that there?
Oh, let's leave that on there. I love that. Yeah. You are still worthy and things can change. Yes. Oh, I love that. Yes, and this next slide is in remembering that self-compassion really involves responding to ourselves in the same and supportive and understanding way that we would to a good friend when they're struggling. I want to give you a minute to reflect on if this is the same way you've been treating yourself. So if you want to put a stamp up here, do you or have you been speaking and caring for yourself, showing yourself the same concern and regard in a way that you would to a friend that you care about? So we've got some on the yes. We've got a check mark in the middle, once again representing a continuum, and I love that it can depend sometimes, right? There might be certain situations where we do and certain situations where it feels harder. Yeah, another kind of in the middle there. And I just want to point out too that the boxes up here aren't really intended to make anyone feel badly about where they're at on that continuum of self-compassion, but more to like normalize the idea that self-compassion can be challenging for some people. And it also recognizes that self-compassion is a skill that really requires practice. The more you practice self-compassion, the more it becomes a really natural way of thinking and being with yourself. And I see up here, I am more gentle with my friends, but then I try to remember the things I've said to them when I'm feeling negative about myself. Oh, thank you so much for pointing that out. And I very much relate to that. I know if I notice an inner dialogue that I'm having, I'll often ask myself if I would say the same thing to my sister or to my good friend or to my son. Would I say what I'm saying to myself? Would I say that to them? And that can be a good way to often gauge where I'm at on that self-compassion scale and to make adjustments. So thank you everyone for sharing, and we will move on to the next piece of self-compassion, which I love. And I kind of gave you that overview, kind of the context, the concept kind of self-compassion. Sarah's going to take us through a lovely way of bringing it into practice. So what does self-compassion look like? How can I practice it? And I'll pass it to you for this part, Sarah.
Wonderful. Thanks, Sam. So this is a kind of like a brief, you can experience it as a guided meditation, really, to go through the steps of self-compassion as laid out by Dr. Kristen Neff, who is one of the leading researchers in the field of self-compassion. And we will be putting some links in the chat later on and also showing it on one of the slides so that you can do some more reading about self-compassion if you're interested. So I will invite you all to make sure that you're seated comfortably. This should take about 5 minutes, although Sam knows that I can be long-winded, so I'll try and rein myself in. So sitting comfortably, and you can really choose whether you'd like to have your eyes closed or gently open, whatever feels best to you. There are 3 steps to self-compassion. mindfulness, common humanity, and kindness to self. And I will be guiding you through these 3 steps now in a fairly brief way. If you're practicing this on your own, of course, you would be able to take as much time as you wanted or needed in this situation. So connecting again with your body and your breath, and just both paying attention to where you're at physically and listening to my voice as you see fit. So step 1 is mindfulness. Mindfulness is very simply awareness of what we are experiencing here and now. This involves turning toward our experience, our thoughts and emotions, not judging or trying to change them. It involves acknowledging our feelings rather than turning away from them or trying to suppress them. So the first step in self-compassion is simply to be mindful of our experience. I like to think of it as taking our emotional pulse. With gentle curiosity and without judgment, I invite you right now to assess what is true for you. What physical sensations are present? You might want to scan your body and seek out any spots with tension or ease, pain or discomfort, coolness or warmth, or anything else that you notice. You may also want to ask what emotions or feelings are present, again, with gentleness and no judgment. Just welcoming them, acknowledging that they're there. And you don't need to have an explanation about what you're feeling or even a name for it. Just make some space to acknowledge that you're feeling it. If there's something that you experience as painful or challenging, you could say simply, this is suffering, or this is stress, or even, ouch. So that's step 1, mindfulness. Step 2 of self-compassion practice is common humanity. Many of us tend to feel isolated when we're suffering or facing failure. And that can actually make whatever we're going through all the more painful. So we can help ourselves to maintain connection by recognizing that the human condition is imperfect, that suffering and pain are part of life, and that we're not alone in our suffering. Is there someone who comes to mind for you when you hear this? Maybe it's a classmate, a friend, a family member, or maybe even a public figure. Bring this person into your mind, into your mind's eye, and remind yourself that your suffering is not unlike the suffering of this person, that you are just as deserving of kindness and care as that person is. Perhaps reminding yourself, my suffering is valid, just as valid as everyone else's suffering. And this is somewhere where you could stay much longer if you were practicing on your own. And it's been found to help reduce feelings of isolation and self-judgment. So that's common humanity. We're going to move to kindness to self now, which is step 3. So this is really about taking a stance of warmth and understanding towards ourselves, especially when we suffer, fail, or feel inadequate. Just like we were talking about earlier, it's about being a friend to ourselves rather than letting our inner critic take over. This might sound simple, but for a lot of us, it takes practice, and that's okay. It's okay if it doesn't come naturally. You can use that wonderful 3-letter word, yet. I'm not super comfortable with being kind to myself yet. So for this step, if you feel comfortable, you might want to place a gentle hand on your heart, or perhaps even just softly on your cheek or cheeks, and ask, what can I do for myself in this moment with what is true for me right now that would be kind or nurturing? I'll just leave you to sit there for a moment, take a few breaths, and listen to whatever answer or answers surface for you. What can I do for myself in this moment that would be kind or nurturing? You may also want to add in some simple messages such as, I am worthy of love. I deserve my own kindness and care. Whatever words feel best for you. And that brings us to the end of our brief practice. I'll just invite you to take another couple of moments and, maybe breathe in whatever you took from that practice. And know that you can go through those steps of mindfulness, common humanity, and kindness to self as often as needed. And the more you do it, the easier it will become. Thank you. I'll pass it back to Sam.
Oh, thank you so much, Sarah. I love when you lead that practice, and I hope that resonated for everybody that's here today. In case you're interested in learning more about self-compassion, there's actually a self-compassion scale that you can do and kind of see where you fall on that. And a lot of this is in relation to Dr. Kristen Neff, who is one of the main and lead researchers on the topic of self-compassion. She has a great TED Talk as well that you might be interested in. So feel free to look at any of those links if you're interested in learning more about self-compassion.